Make sure you do split screen this time.
Oh, Sev, come on. Well, Zoom did call me and said, look, pro, Sweets, look, you gained some weight, of course, and you need the rent the Hubble telescope to get you on one screen. You can't fit you in Sev the same screen. It's impossible. We can't fit you in a snowflake, like a grain of sand from the Manhattan Beach, so you need to do two screens. So, I obliged for 1 week, and now we're back to the split screen because they can't rent Hubble telescope. There's only 12 people who watch us every week. They can't really rent the Hubble telescope for our viewership. All right, Sev. Next episode, what are we on? 7, 8, 12, 4? Who knows?
Might be 6, I think.
I can't even count to 4, so I'm not even worried about it.
This will be 6.
All right, we're going to set it to 23. You can't even see that. Come on. It's not even close. But we'll start it up. We're going to talk about today in development, how you develop or what's your approach to players that don't play a lot. They're not necessarily players at the end of the bench who never play, but players who don't play, maybe play sparingly. I know, at the pro level, you might get rookies. I don't know about when you were I'm sure your deal with Chicago or LA, you had it when I was with Dallas. You had rookies that might play one day and not play for another month or 2 or 3 weeks. What's your mindset and sort of how do you develop that? The first guy who ever talked to me about the subject was Tate's Lock, about when he was with Portland, how he would work with – they had a big Korean kid that never played. I forgot the guy's name. And he had to work with him every day. And he would trade stories about how – he would tell me about some of the things he would do to sort of keep him engaged. What are your thoughts on players who don't like working with players who play sparingly to very little?
First thing that the coaches have to understand is those players that you're talking about, you might be the only one, and you probably will be the only guy on the staff that will have anything to do with them consistently.
Right.
Like you mentioned last week, I think, if the sparingly used player gets into the game and has a great game, plays 10 minutes and has 10 points or something, which, the next day, everybody's going to want to talk to the guy.
You ever see a stampede scene on Yellowstone? That'll be the assistant coaches going to work with that kid the next day if he has a good night.
Right. But that's pretty rare. But the coach that deals with the kid every day has got to be prepared for that scenario in case it comes up. But it's really important to know that you're probably going to be the only one that talks and works with that guy every day, day in and day out, regardless play, doesn't play. Mm-hmm. And so we've talked about consistency before, but you got to make sure that you're consistent with that guy and you're the same person every other day. Good day, bad day. It doesn't matter. You got to be consistent and be there for that guy every day. So that's the first thing that I think is really important, that knowing that kid's got to know that you're there every day for him, good or bad, because they're going to be up and down.
Sure.
They're going to have good days, bad. They are. They're going to be days when they're depressed, good days, bad days, all that stuff. So just be prepared for that, number one.
Yeah, I think definitely you have to be in there for the long term for him or her, no question. I think that they need to be prepared every day to go to battle, and getting their routine in and keeping that routine straight every day about getting their shots, knowing the playbook, knowing the game plan, regardless if they're going to play or not, because you have to prepare them. You never know. You never know. It happens at any level, but at the pro level, it's you go to Portland in December and you're on the road, third game, 5 nights, you're down 18 in the first quarter. And then the coach finally says, "Hey, Johnny, come on, let's go. Let's try something new. We're getting our ass kicked." And you got to be ready because, there's no, at that level, there's really no cupcake on your schedule. There's no, you're playing against NBA players every night but they got to be prepared, because if they're not mentally there, if they're feeling sorry for themselves, if no one's really working with them, it could really mess them up, because they may not get another opportunity for another 3 months or ever, for that team if they're not prepared every night.
Yeah, and it's the mental battle that you're going to face with those guys. of every day making sure, okay, say you're at a walkthrough in the morning before a game, and that kid's probably not even going to be on the court for the walkthrough.
Right.
Okay. And a lot of times if they're not on the court for the walkthrough, what are their tendencies? Just to kind of mentally wander off, look in the stands, talk to a trainer or something. So that's when you got to be able to grab those guys and say, hey, come stand next to me, pay attention, focus in on what's going on. And it's hard for those guys because they're going to give you the, why am I doing this? I'm not going to play anyway.
Yeah.
So you got to be mentally tough enough to grab those kids every day at walkthrough or during the film. Make sure you sit next to them because they're going to have a tendency to lose focus.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, really important that you handle the mental side of it first.
Yeah. The preparation is really key in keeping them engaged in, playbook, because especially if you have a veteran coach that don't especially like rookies or don't trust them yet,
Both of us have worked for those guys.
We've all dealt with all that. Right. And you got to keep them prepared and keep them engaged because like you said, I mean, look, if the player does well, that coach might roll with them for that game or for that week or that month. It could turn into something. And if they don't, it just gives them ownership of like, I told you so. He's not ready. I don't want to. Now it just sort of it clicks in their head like, yeah, I knew that this guy wasn't ready, so I don't need to use him. So yeah, keeping them prepared, game plan, get their shots, get their workouts, daily routine. Don't feel sorry for themselves. Keep them going, motivate them. I like to talk to players a lot. I like to text them, call them, make sure they're good but you got to prepare them for that too and say, look, you might not be playing a lot at first. So we got to sort of build our case of why you should play. So maybe we're building now for 2 months from now, but we're building a plan for our plans and our missions in 2 months. It's not necessarily tomorrow. So we got to do this. It's not just going to come in 2 months. You got to earn it in practice, in games, and being prepared and going forward,
And a lot of times it's for the next year.
Yes. Yeah. For the pro level, for sure. And even in high school, you might be working with a freshman that, hey, look, by your sophomore year, I know players hate that these days, but sophomore, maybe junior year, but we're going to build on it right now and build that, build you up that mountain a little bit with, preparation, routine, knowing plays, knowing game plans,
And it's different, for professional players, the type of guys we're talking about, it's different than like say college, where the last 4 guys on a college team are usually walk-ons.
Yeah.
They're usually cheerleaders. Maybe their parents have a connection with the program or something.
No question.
But those guys, 12 through 15 are usually walk-on guys at the end of the bench who are there to be great cheerleaders.
Sure.
Maybe they want to be coaches someday. They really don't have, let's be honest, if they're the 13th man at Duke and they're at Carolina, those guys really don't want to be in the game.
No.
But the guys we're talking about at the professional level, this is new to them.
Yeah, no doubt.
They've always been, the man in high school, the man in college. Now all of a sudden you're going to tell me I'm not going to play for a month?
Right.
That's all new territory for them that you got to help them navigate and monitor through.
Well, if those guys at the end of the Duke bench get, that don't play, get, a little disheartened about the whole thing, they could just go off the street into the building their dad donated to the program before he got on the team. So, maybe there's a student center or rec center. You could just go and chill.
Are you telling me that happens really at that level?
No, never, ever. No, are you crazy? At the heck?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so there's a preparation standpoint. An assistant coach, Mike Weiner from Dallas, actually did this when I got there. It was a great idea for young players in general. And that's not necessarily if you play or not play, but he gave the players quizzes at every shoot around. And he would, give them like 10 questions after every shoot around about game plan, who's starting tonight for the other team, what's our opening play, and just some
our
questions.
Coverage on such and such. Yeah.
Yeah. And asking, like, even quizzing. I think that's a big part of it. Cause again, it's mental prep and it's game prep, it's daily preparation to keep those players engaged in things. Maybe you have them play 3-on-3, maybe, with other players that don't play. Give them a game plan. Maybe you set up your 3-on-3 offensively of an action that you're going to run that night, or something the other team's going to see. You try to keep them engaged every way possible to keep them fresh, keep them going, because you never know when you're going to need them. In some levels, like you said, 12 to 15, you might never need them, but you never know. And I think I'm going to quote Harry Bosch again, everybody counts or nobody counts. I think you have to sort of put some time into every type of player that you're going to work with. And it's a great project for you as far as a coach, being able to keep a player like that fresh and keep them ready. Because if they do get ready and they do progress, it was a lot of, not all of it, but it was a lot of your work that went into it for that player to be prepared,
Yeah, you have to. I think it's a good challenge for a coach for them to be innovative.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a routine, but within that routine, you can be innovative and mix up the work that you're doing, keeping it fresh.
Yeah.
But definitely, you mentioned routine, and that's definitely part of it. And I've seen players that we've had first-round picks that could not fight through that mentally and could not handle not playing after being, say, a first-round pick or early second-round pick. And I've seen those guys, not make it. And 2 years after you draft them, they're in Europe.
Yeah, I think, Sev, communication has a lot to do with that. You have to talk to the player early and get them ready for it. Say, look, at least the process that I went through, in Dallas, guy gets drafted, you have summer league. You're not talking about, you don't really say much to the kid. You let them sort of find themselves, because they got draft, they come to you, take all the pictures, they go back, they come back in 2 or 3 days. You got summer league practice, training camp, then you're in summer league. So you don't really want to talk about them there. Then they go through their whole summer league, then maybe a couple more months, and then maybe that September, you might sit them down and be like, look, this is probably going to be your role this year. Now, whatever that role is going to be. Now, just say they're not going to play, but getting them ready for that. Say, look, it's not like you're dead to us, but you need to develop X, Y, Z. We're gonna do this in stages, but we really think you could contribute. But I want you to get ready for, after training camp, where in training camp preseason you'll get some time. But once the rotation's set, especially if you have a veteran team, hey, let's get ready for this. And because you're going to be a good player, but I don't want you to go in thinking you're going to play 40 minutes a night, and if it doesn't happen, then you blow off your first year, because first year is huge. Knowing your routine, knowing how to be a pro, knowing how to be prepared, and then we're going to get you through this. You're going to have some spells where you play, and we need to keep you. We've got to keep the momentum going forward, because this, it gets dicey, but you're going to have a chance, but you just can't. You can't figure this thing off on game one. You got to wait on this. It's going to be a uphill climb. And I think when you don't talk to players and you just work them out, and if they play minutes, they play minutes. They don't, and you don't talk to them. That's when, like you said, they can't handle it. 2 years later, they're getting Rosetta Stone for Christmas, and that's what they're going to have to use for wherever they're going to play.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And one of the things, like you said, I've heard you say this before. For young kids like that, you have to have an 18-month plan.
Mm-hmm.
That's where, the second summer becomes really important, probably more important than the first summer that you get them.
Mm-hmm.
What about Sweet Chuck? And I did this a little bit because you and I are both behind the bench type guys.
Sure.
But I would try to, during the game, during a timeout, or maybe at halftime, grab those guys just real quick and maybe point out something that you saw, or ask them what they saw, and try to keep them engaged a little bit actually during the game, during the timeouts and stuff. Obviously, you're not going to talk to them during play, but I think it's important that, maybe 2 or 3 times a game you look down at that kid and maybe go down to him and say, what'd you think? What'd you see? What would you do here? What do you think about that?
Yeah. So DK, Don Cockstein, was the one who got him. First of all, that 18-month plan was stolen right out of Tate Salok's book. So he was, he gave me the 18 months. We didn't think anything is original here. I mean, look, I got a stolen Rondo plaque in the back here. You think anything here is bought and paid for? But anyways, so Don Cockstein would do this thing with all our young guys that didn't play. First of all, that he would make the point, look, you got to be in right when the coach is drawing stuff up. Carlisle had a tendency to draw something up in the huddle, erase everything, and at the last second coming out of a huddle say, oh, you're in for this guy. And like he wouldn't have the thing drawn, so you couldn't see it, and you have to be prepared. So we talked about all of our young guys being right there in the front of the huddle. But the thing that he would do, and I picked up on it, I wasn't good at X's and O's. I'm glad he knew a couple of plays we ran. When they came out of the huddle, they're like, all right, what are we running? Who are we running it to? Tell me about it. And so he would have to tell DK what they were running. I thought it was great. It kept those players engaged. And, like out of timeouts, talking to those guys when they're coming back to the bench or before the coach is drawing something up, or talking to them and keeping them engaged. Say, hey, look, after this timeout, I want you to pay attention to Chris Paul and tell me what he's doing, and keep engaged. And like half the time they're like, well, I'm not going to play. Who cares? I'm like, well, you should care, because you need to be prepared about when you get into games eventually and you got to play against him. I want to know what he likes to do, what he doesn't like to do. What's this player doing? What are they running? And then after the timeout, they would talk, and he would say something, say whatever. And I think that's huge, Sev. I think keeping those players engaged during games, because it shows you care, and it develops your relationship with them, because they know that like not a lot of people are going to be paying attention to them if they don't play. You're the one who's gearing into those guys and into those players, and you showing that you care, and they see that. And I think that's big, and it keeps them engaged in what's going on.
Yeah, and the young player that really doesn't pay attention and is not engaged in all that, he's a pro, okay, because he's getting paid.
Yeah.
The young player that pays attention and can answer those questions, that's a professional.
Yes.
Okay, and there's a difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And the quicker you can get them to understand that this is all about being professional, I think that's really going to be beneficial to them. Because if they're the guy that's over there on the baseline looking at girls and jacking around with the water boys and all that stuff, he's still getting paid, so he's a pro.
Yeah.
But he's not being professional in his approach.
No,
and
it isn't.
Sometimes the behind the bench coaches are the ones that got to call that out.
Yeah.
Because the other guys aren't going to, they're worrying about coverages and substitutions and timeouts and fouls and all that stuff, So if you're a behind the bench coach, you're the one that's got to take care of the end of the bench. That's kind of part of your deal.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and again, that's a conversation that needs to be done before even the first game. Say, look, in this game, if you're not going to play, you got to be engaged on all our timeouts. You got to know what's going on. You got to know what plays we're running, who we're running them to. You got to listen to what the players are saying, because this is lingo that you're going to have to pick up, because in 4 or 5 years, you're going to be this guy that's going to be telling everybody what's going on.
And we don't expect you to know what all 5 guys are doing on a certain ATO.
No.
You should know what your position's doing.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, again, that conversation needs to be done in meetings before, getting them ready for the whole package of being a professional. Yeah. And being prepared, getting your shots up, knowing the playbook, in game, knowing the game plan, and then in game, what are you doing? How you handling timeouts, how you watching your opponents, how you getting ready for that during a game. How can you do other things? We had Jalen Brunson, who's still with Dallas, who's one of the more polished rookies I've ever seen. He was like that. He sat next to the assistant coaches. He was in on everything. He wanted to help. He's so engaged, in what he was doing. And, he's a professional. Like, he's a guy that played off and on. He did play by the end, but he was like a 10-year pro first day,
I think guys like Jalen, who grew up in a family where, his dad was a professional player, mm-hmm. I think that's a huge advantage. I mean, you look at the guys who grew up where their dad was a pro, like the young fella Cole Anthony coming up this year.
Sure.
We had him at Nike last year, and just being around him, you could tell he's professional in his approach. I mean, I don't know how good of a player he's going to be. Who knows? Yeah. But you could tell that he's grown up around pros.
Yeah.
Steph Curry was the same way. You can almost think of any professional player that's parent played, that they grew up kind of around that mentality, that they tend to pick things up and get it earlier.
Yeah. Like you said, Sev, it's being a professional. You could be a professional at any level. Being prepared, taking it serious, being engaged, being invested in the product. You got to be invested in what you're doing. And I think that that's a big part of being professional. But, there's going to be times. I mean, there's going to be times during the year where they start going over the cliff and losing it.
Right.
Maybe that's a time where you shorten up a workout and you're like, look, let's just get some spots up today. I know you're going through it. But I think there's got to be plenty of times where you're flexible on your approach with them. You never sort of, you have that line in the sand where they can't cross about being unprofessional about it, but you got to expect them at some point to be a little frustrated, and maybe you sort of change up your approach a little bit. But again, you have your pillars of what's important, and they can't cross that. But you got to expect some drawback sometimes and some pushback with, well, why am I doing this every day? This is tough, but that's what it's about.
Yeah. The woe is me attitude is going to come out a few times during the year.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to be able to address that. The other thing, let's talk a little bit about high school players that don't play much, because in high school, you're probably going to play 7 guys, maybe 8 guys,
Sure.
really. Mm-hmm. So now you have another problem that you have to deal with the guys that don't play in high school, and that's the parents.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now you got a whole nother dynamic to deal with, and how you going to deal with those parents when a kid's not playing. And there's a lot of ways to deal with it. Now you're just not talking about the kids
Mm-hmm.
who don't play. You got to deal with their parents. In college, you may have to deal with parents a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe runners a little bit. But in high school, you're having to deal with another layer of problems.
Yeah. And look, it's their child, so they're not going to really be, they're not going to be subjective about it, right? So you got to expect that. I think that if you, again, head them off at the pass early, talk to them, maybe have a night where they all come in and just talk to them and say, look, we'll have this discussion now, but, as far as who plays and how long they play for, that's going to be my discretion. But obviously everybody competes for their spots. I want to win, but it's not going to be easy sometimes, because not everybody's going to get all this time. There's only many minutes that you could have, and it's going to be tough. And I don't know if there's any perfect way to do it, but I think, again, communicating and talking and, being upfront about things is easy. I think you get in a lot of problems when you're just sort of militant about it, or you shut them out and don't talk to them about it because you feel as though it's your responsibility to deal these minutes out, and they shouldn't be in on it, which is sort of right, but you got to have to deal with them. I mean, how would you deal with that, Sev?
I found the best thing to do in high school, I found out, was, the preseason parents meeting is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Where you lay out the whole thing and how you're going to deal with their complaints and their concerns, and when are you going to deal with it?
Right.
I had a rule where I'm not going to talk to parents after a game.
Mm-hmm.
Both sides are too emotional.
That was pretty fair.
So we'd always wait till the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And never, I would never want to talk to parents like right before practice. If they're dropping their kid off and they want to talk to you before, that's not the time either.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're trying to get ready for practice, and you don't want, a bad conversation with a parent to roll over into practice. So you set all that up at your preseason meeting with parents, and then maybe that can eliminate some of those problems. College, you're not dealing with parents as much. What you're dealing with now in college is transfer.
Sure.
Yeah, the first thing they want to do is, I had a college coach call me this morning and say, could you watch some film on one of my players? He wants to transfer to a Power 5 conference. Could
Mm-hmm.
you watch film on him and let me know what you really think?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times in college, it's not the parents, it's the transfer.
Yeah.
That you got to deal with.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. I mean, I get talks and emails all the time about 50-year transfers. What should I do, or how should we handle this? And I always say, like, all these players that like to transfer up, if you're in that situation, not a lot of the people viewing this will be, but if you're in that situation, most of the players that transfer up don't really do well. It's, I'd rather put up numbers and continue to have growth in maybe a lower situation and be a focal point and carry a team rather than be the ninth or 10th man on a Power 5 conference or a way bigger conference. I think,
the Duncan Robinson stories of the world are very, very few and far between.
Yeah, for every Duncan Robinson, there's like 900 Duncan Hineses or Johnny Robinsons, that you never hear about. And
it just don't know what we're talking about. That's Division III Williams College to University of Michigan to now in the rotation for the Miami Heat as a young player.
One of the best 3-point shooters in the league. Yeah, I mean that's
great. That's an aberration.
Yeah, I agree. But like again, I think heading this stuff off at the pass, having these conversations, talking. And then, but have a plan for these players. I think, every player that's the thing in Dallas, like sometimes you care about the players who don't play more than you care about the superstars in some senses where like, I mean, if you're in player development, I'm saying like where you want to plan for everyone. I think if you just go into a situation, you blow off those players who don't play, it ruins the situation for them. And it's a bad experience, and it makes you think like they think like you're using them anyway. And B, like it's just not good business for a player development coach if you don't have plans for every player that you work with. Now, look, every player, you can't develop every player into a great player. We know that. But I think you owe it to them to have a plan to try to work on something and some type of a plan to, look, if you get in the game, this is how you need to help us. It might just be cutting. It might just be screening. It might be what have you. But I think everybody needs to be prepared. Everybody needs to be a professional. And then everybody sort of has that different thing that they're going to help the team with. And, I think you owe it to the player. Like I said, everybody, or Harry Bosch says, everybody counts or nobody counts.
Right.
Last Coyote.
All right.
All right. We're up to it, Sev. What else do you got? What's the last thing you want to talk about players that don't play?
Learn, if you're a coach and you're dealing with those players, learn how to get through to them the best. Mm-hmm. Learn what makes them tick. Learn what kind of turns the light bulb on for them to not have them continuously be frustrated.
I think you need to learn what kind of Gatorade they like because those guys are taking the good Gatorade before the starters get to the bench. So I think you need to learn that first. That's my contribution to the conversation.
Yeah, learn what kind of Gatorade. Learn what makes them tick.
Absolutely, I think so too. Like, and it's good. Look, I think you use any type of sports to sort of get people ready for the real world. If you prepare, if you have a plan, if you carry that out, if you deal with adversity, if you know how to be a good teammate, coachable, high energy, that's real life stuff. How to deal with that on a job or when you go further in life. Like the people who just like quit when things aren't given to them, that's. As a player, I'm talking about now as a coach, again, you need to plan for every situation. I think if you're going to be a well-rounded coach, you know how to deal with superstars, you know how to deal with players that don't play and everything in between. And those are the lessons that are going to really do it. I don't think a lot of coaches like to deal with that situation. They usually pass those players off to other people until they start playing well and they want to take credit for it. I've seen that 1,000 times, but I think you need to have a plan for everyone. And I think that's a big part of it. So anyway, I'm going to do my Dwight Schrute. I got my beats right here ready to go. I'm putting literally and figuratively putting lipstick on a pig by eating healthy today.
Okay. And my wife and I are going to make a sandwich and head down to the beach.
Peanut butter and honey, baby.
And as we always say,
I'll talk to you, brother.
Yeah.
Yep.